Welcome to IDEA, the digital archive for the stories of migrant women. In this tutorial, we will show you how to prepare an interview and how to carry out the interview with history methods. Step 1. Contacting the narrator by telephone. Contact the narrator by telephone. Give notice of your telephone call either by email or text message. Once you have contact, give a short introduction about you and the IDEA project. The IDEA flyer could be helpful here.
Hallo Anna-Lucia, Franziska von IDEA hier.
Explain to the narrator why her story is interesting for the project. Expect doubts. Reassure the narrator that doubts are normal.
Wir suchen Migrantinnen, die sich engagieren und deswegen brauchst du doch keine Sorge haben, du bist genau richtig.
Arrange a date for private talks with the narrator, choosing the place for the interview. Preparation and the telephone call should take between 15 and a maximum of 40 minutes. Step 2. Meeting the narrator. The first meeting with the narrator is about getting to know each other. Maybe you could bring a little present.
Ich habe dir noch was mitgebracht.
Dankeschön, ja, komm doch rein.
Ja, gerne.
The first talk should at least answer these questions. What is the interview about? Why is the narrator important to us? How much time do we need? What happens to the interview? Who is behind IDEA? You can use the IDEA info sheet for narrators as a guide for the first meeting. It is good to have a recorder with you.
Und wird jetzt auch gleich eine Testaufnahme starten.
Maybe you could try a few test recordings together to get the narrator used to speaking into a microphone. Encourage the narrator to think back on her personal life story.
Vielleicht noch Fotos oder Briefe gibt, alte, die für die Geschichte interessant sind.
An aid to this is IDEA's biographical questionnaire. Ask her to fill in the form before the date of the interview. Also talk to the narrator about what happens to the recorded interview and that we need a written approval to broadcast and archive her story. It is probably better to go through this declaration of consent together at the first meeting and both sign it. At the latest, this should happen before the beginning of the interview.
Si quieres podemos hablar en español también, como prefieres.
Arrange a date with the narrator for the interview. The narrator decides on the location of the interview, but together you should see to choose a quiet spot. Step 3. Preparing for the interview. Soon after the first meeting, you should begin preparing for the interview while the words are still fresh. Preparation includes gathering topics to discuss in the interview. What did you find interesting during the first meeting? Doing a little research. Working out and organizing questions for the interview. As preparation for the interview, you should get some background knowledge. What do you know about the country the narrator comes from? What do you know of the city where she now lives? Organize your questions like proposed in IDEA Manual for Doing Oral History. You will find IDEA sample questions in the center of this booklet. They might help you with the preparations. The amount of time spent on this should be at least 1 hour and at most 6 hours. Step 4. Carrying out the interview. Bring something to write with to the interview, your recording device and a little present.
Schön, dass es jetzt heute geklappt hat. Wir richten jetzt erstmal die Technik ein, das kennst du ja schon.
Often one starting question is enough to begin. This can help to trigger memories of the narrator. Your conversation should be free-flowing and following what she wishes to talk about. If the interview is going well, you probably will not have to ask most of your questions. Still, they will give you some confidence during the interview and make sure that you can be a good listener. Ask the narrator to select a quiet location and to mute her cell phone to avoid interruption.
Ich habe ja auch mit Menschen gearbeitet. Also ich war eben.
You too can disturb by accident, so it is better during the interview just to nod silently while keeping eye contact with the narrator. Remember that your behavior both before and during the interview is important for the success of the conversation. Try to create an open and familiar atmosphere. Some of your opinions should be put aside. Try not to judge the comments of the narrator. Your aim is to encourage the memories of the narrator and to make her feel at ease also when talking about difficult topics. Listen attentively and actively.
Möchtest du darüber reden, wie es für dich war?
Questions can help open up particular topics. Always make sure to ask questions sensitively. Sometimes narrators can become angry or sad about certain memories, so be prepared for this. In such situations, tell her that these reactions are okay. Sometimes it is useful to help the narrator view her own experiences from a certain distance. The interview should last about 60 to 90 minutes. If you notice that your partner is becoming tired, then you should end the interview.
So, das genügt auch schon
If,
für heute.
however, not everything has been talked about, then you can always arrange a second interview. Step 5. Saving and documenting the interview.
Als Migrantin in Deutschland habe ich eben die.
For IDEA, it is important that you process the interview. The data, for example, needs to be sent to the IDEA cloud. You can find information about how to do this in the IDEA tutorial Recording the Interview with a Smartphone. At the very latest now, the biographical questionnaire should be filled out. For long-lasting, successful documentation, you should draw up minutes after the interview. This should contain the date, the length and location of your interview. Additionally, you can leave some biographic information on you and your motives for the interview. Remarks about the course of the interview and the circumstances, for example, life conditions during the pandemic, are useful to help a better understanding of the interview in years to come. How did the interview come about? What were your impressions of the talk with the narrator? These things can also be mentioned in your minutes. IDEA also needs the signed declaration of consent, otherwise we cannot use the recording. Step 6. After the interview. The finished interview will be transcribed by an IDEA team member and may be translated. Finally, it will be edited by the IDEA editorial staff and extracts will be prepared for an online publication. As an interviewer, you too can become part of the editorial team.